refused to allow two British customs agents to go below deck of his ship, and that was considered by some as the first physical act of resistance by British authority in the American colonies. In the year 1865, more U.S. history, Confederate General Robert Lee and nearly 27,000 troops surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse to U.S. Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant, which ended the Civil War in the United States. In 1869, the Hudson Bay Company ceded its territory to Canada. In 1992, on this day, John Major was elected Prime Minister of the United Kingdom after his Conservative Party won the most votes in British electoral history. And on this day in 2003, Baghdad fell to U.S. forces, ending the invasion of Iraq, but also resulting in widespread looting in that city. We now move on to our dish of the day. The Daily Dish is brought to you the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Because you can unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+, this all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Pops, doors, you'll see. Come down to my nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Bruce Lanes, and Slack Street in Viewfort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
Welcome back to our program for today, for this Wednesday, and apologies we weren't on air yesterday. But of course, it is no longer a slow boat to China. And indeed, the vast majority of ships around the world right now are likely to have been made in the People's Republic of China. That has caused a certain level of concern amongst some parties out there, particularly, of course, the United States of America, which, as we can see, has effectively begun an all-out trade war with respect to the People's Republic of China. Now, there have been some speculations that part of the shift in terms of any sort of support and effort in terms of Ukraine and trying to, quote unquote, wrap up this war with Russia and Ukraine was in part to somewhat allow the United States to focus its gaze on its Pacific front, and more specifically that of China. Of course, mainland China, the People's Republic of China, is still a communist country in terms of its governance, certainly, but has, over the past 3 decades plus, has certainly transformed its economy to the extent that it is seen as one which certainly rivals that of the United States of America. It may not yet be there in terms of overall GDP calculations, but for those who are looking at what may be considered real industries, China appears to certainly be dominating a lot of those areas. And one can just, pick an item of import in terms of industrialization and see the trend of what has happened over the decades and how the world has certainly shifted as a result of this monumental growth in that of China. You've been hearing quite a lot about, of course, even from individuals like Donald Trump himself and the many of his advisors and the cabinet and supporters of the president, that America has gone into a state of deindustrialization. And what is that really? Well, we have to think about that whole process of industrialization from the start, which was really a progress of mechanization, of innovation, of technologies which came together, which certainly changed the way the world works and a lot of the things that, of course, we take for granted in today's world. And I mean, there are lots of theories about that, but largely something which really took hold in the 1800s, in the 1820s, and was really a process that was led in large measure by the United Kingdom, and then later on spread into other parts of of Europe and as well the United States of America, and then later on spread into the development and growth of in other regions, including in Asia, much later on. But in the case of the United Kingdom, of course, the spread of, we think of things like the steamship and the steam engine coming forward, which led to the expansion of railways and the rise of steel production. And steel has certainly been one of these materials which has really symbolized, I suppose you could say, the trend and the progress of development. Of course, we've heard of these times. You know, you had the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. The Industrial Revolution certainly was about the Steel Age. Being able to have steel meant that you could build stronger vessels, you could build better ships, you could build taller buildings and sturdier buildings, and you could build railways. You know, and the whole process of development really somewhat centered about well, you know, how much steel you could actually produce, and certainly the United States was once one of those major players in that thrust towards industrialization, and that is really where a lot of the argument lies, in that no longer is the U.S. this manufacturing giant, this manufacturing power, and that somehow they are being cheated from this ability to do so by China. Now, of course, that narrative is perhaps a very skewed one and is not based in reality as to how things actually progress to how they are today. The reality is that China, in and of itself, as well as India, have long been the most populous countries and regions in the world. And this is something that has existed way back into time, even into the the medieval ages, the 1500s, before the expansion of colonization by Europe around the world. China and India were in fact seen to be the largest economies in the world at one point in time back then. And then, of course, they, as a result of this whole thrust of expansion and global conquest, and then later on, the means to be able to achieve technological gains through a lot of this wealth, and then, of course, the industrialization process. Wealth certainly was accreted within the Europe and Americas, and well, North America. And so that whole thrust, of course, which sort of came in between the 1800s, 1900s, really led to the dominance of the West as we understand it. And of course, even beyond the world wars of the early 20th century, that seemed to have been the architecture which the major players wanted to be able to maintain. And of course, out of that post-World War II era, we saw institutions being created the United Nations, as well as what were known as the Bretton Woods institutions of the World Bank and the IMF, which were meant to play a sort of controlling and stabilizing role within the world economy. And of course, then as well, the rise of the World Trade Organization, the WTO, effectively setting rules for how countries should relate to each other in terms of trade and fair trade and the promotion of open markets. All of that was a system largely developed by the likes of the United States of America. And coming out of that period, we certainly saw a significant shift. But the shift was not an immediate shift. And certainly, if one again looks at the just again coming back to steel and the production of steel, back in 1967, the world produced somewhere about 500 gigatons of steel, and of the largest producer back then was certainly by far the United States of America. They produced somewhere in the region over 20% of all the world's production of steel back then, somewhere about 115 gigatons. Now, of course, China at that point was just about 14 gigatons. So they were a very small, minuscule producer. They were not even producing about an eighth of what the United States was actually producing at that time. Other major producers would have been the likes of Germany. Japan would have been the second largest producer at that time back in the 1960s, as well as some of these European countries and the USSR, the likes of Russia and Ukraine in today's current context. And you now, of course, shift and fast forward to 2024, where you see a very, very, very different reality with respect to the production of steel. In the case of the United States, truth be told, they are in fact producing less steel than they produced back in 1967. They're at about 80 gigatons today. They are certainly nowhere near being, they're not even the second largest producer. That has certainly been eclipsed by the likes of India. India is a major producer right now of steel. They're still up there. They're still up there in the ranking. They're number 4 after the likes of India and Japan. And so they're in the regions of what countries like Russia and South Korea are actually producing today. But by far, the dominant player in the world production of steel is that of China, which represents over 1,000 gigatons in the world's roughly 1,881 gigatons of production of steel annually, which was coming from 2024's data. And that represents about 53%, well over half of the world's production of what is effectively one of the critical inputs, basic inputs into the industrial process. And so this is part of the change, of course, that has come about. And certainly China has successfully put its place as number 1 in producing many, 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 many things. And it's not, of course, just manufacturing in terms of agriculture, in terms of even tech as well. They are certainly rising to become number 1 in production of many items around the world. And that has, of course, afforded them some significant successes. Of course, we've seen how their economy has shot forward by some measures. If one looks at GDP, perhaps by what is termed purchasing power parity, not necessarily nominal GDP. Some may even argue that the United States has potentially even surpassed that of China has surpassed that of the United States. But in terms of just raw nominal GDP, the United States is still on top. The issue, of course, is that a lot of the wealth of the United States has shifted into that of services. And those services are very broad and can include things, for example, the dominance of the technology field, the dominance of things like education services, for example, U.S. schools, U.S. universities, the over 4,000 of them are largely seen to be the best in the world by most rankings that you come up of universities. They certainly are and have been in the past the most well endowed in terms of very large reserves of funds which support their expansion and research programs. Although right now, very interesting state of affairs with respect to Mr. Trump and his approach to many of these universities. First, we saw the likes of Columbia University in New York facing a pulling away of support, I think nearly $400 million in support from the government being taken away from that university, it having to effectively change its approach, so to speak, in terms of dealing with civil rights matters. We've seen, of course, what has happened in many institutions around the United States with respect to foreign students, their visas being taken away. And just recently as well, 2 additional leading schools facing the freezing of support from the U.S. government. I think Cornell University being one of them too. And so it's very strange because you have certainly a clear advantage with the United States in terms of its education system and the strength of its university systems. But right now, one will have to ask if you had an opportunity to study in the United States, would that necessarily be the most attractive place to go? And a lot of people are now looking at that, perhaps with some concern. In fact, even so, a lot of the individuals who were in fact heading to U.S. schools and universities were coming from the rest of the world, from Asia, India, China, as well as everybody else. And so as to whether that is going to be something that is protected in some way from the kind of changes that we're seeing right now, it'll be interesting to see. And so within the context of what the U.S. has been able to do very well, that has been one of them. And of course, they've also been leaders in terms of research and development, in terms of technology, in terms of financial services. And so even the success story of China, one can say, could not have been possible without significant amounts of investment by the United States of America into China. And there is still that advantage that that U.S. companies have in fact been utilizing in this entire journey towards growth of these companies. They have effectively taken offshore a lot of the processes which they deemed could have been done more effectively in other parts of the world, and the manufacturing processes we speak of in particular. And so that trend has been something that has been going on for many, many, many decades now, certainly since the 1990s. We saw a rise in that and lots of investments by US companies into manufacturing in China. But at the end of the day, Apple, albeit one could argue to some degree, Apple is a multinational company, yes. A lot of the profits that Apple makes are actually not they're not secured in the United States of America anymore. They're in Ireland, and of course that's for tax purposes. But this is the nature of what you have. You've got a company, one of the most highly capitalized companies in the world. When you look at the value of their stocks and how much the company is worth, and a lot of that worth is not in the actual handset per se, in the actual physical handset. The worth that a company that Apple has is in the patents. It is stored in the technology, the know-how, the design of the Apple phone, which allows it to be something that is such a powerful device for the ordinary person. And so the actual cost to manufacture the phone is, of course, reduced by producing it in a place which has the means to do it most efficiently. And the reality is, right now, that is in China. And does that mean that China actually makes the most of an Apple phone? Probably not. It has part of the value. If you look at the total value chain, it's making part of it, yes, from the actual physical manufacturing of that item. But what you're really paying for, a lot of what you're paying for, is the technology. You're paying for the software. You're paying for the operating system. You're paying for what is bringing these elements to life, right? That gives it great meaning for you, right? And so that still is something that resides largely within the context of America's financial services system. It still lies largely through the technology ecosystems that have been developed in Silicon Valley and in places that make these things happen. Perhaps the change now and the threat that we're seeing even more so is that you're seeing the spread of know-how around the world. And so it is, we're now seeing that there are other companies, there are other countries that are developing their technology capabilities, and they are in fact potentially now rivaling the United States of America. And so it is certainly, for some, within the context of the US, perhaps this existential moment. And it appears that certainly in the mind of Mr. Donald Trump, he wants to somehow press the reset button. He somehow wants to change the state of play and the rules of the game. And herein lies the challenge, because the United States of America effectively were the ones who set the rules in the first place. They had the most influence and were able to effectively put out what one would want to see around the world in terms of good governance, in terms of democratic principles, in terms of free trade, and all these elements of globalization. And they've now come to a point where perhaps the entire the principle of what has underpinned the rules, they now want to effectively say, hey, well, you know what, maybe we're not winning as well as we thought we would be winning in this entire rules-based environment. And so now they've sort of gone contrary to a lot of the principles and rules that have underpinned the world for many, many, many years now, for the past couple, certainly over the past 5 to 6 decades. And so here we are now in a situation where there is almost seemingly, very clearly, I suppose, at this point, a trade war, which is not simply a trade war between China and the United States, but seemingly a trade war between the United States and nearly everybody else at this point in time. And so this is really where the world is finding itself into a very, very precarious situation. And of course, last we heard, the U.S. now declaring 104% tariffs on Chinese products. That is an astounding figure, and can only be, I mean, in terms of the theoretical dollar value, I haven't actually calculated it, but just based, on the amount of goods that the United States just brings in from China on an annual basis, I mean, and you just double that, and to think that this is what is now being asked, for individuals to now pay to bring goods in from China. I mean, you can clearly see that this is meant to be very, 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 debilitating on trade with China. Of course, it is an all-out trade war in that China is not backing down. And they also have hit back with reciprocal tariffs to some degree, with 84% tariffs being put on some U.S. goods, as well as the proposed ban of lots of different things coming out of the U.S., like Hollywood movies, for example, not being played on Chinese theaters and the like. So very, very interesting days ahead as to when there will be any sort of backing down, as to when one side is going to decide to blink, as to who's going to call whose bluff, or is it really going to end up in a situation that is precipitating a really dangerous potential of conflict that may be even beyond that of merely trade wars. And that is certainly a very, very precarious situation that the world finds itself in right now. Effectively, the elephants are fighting, or at a standoff at the very least, and goodness knows, those of us who might be in the grass, what the implications may be. That's our dish of the day, and when we come back, we'll take in our weather report.
This has been The Daily Dish.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Because if unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. This all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gas and vanity. Boss, you'll see. Come down, don't mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Jubrosile, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939.
Island style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island style, whoa. We got the time that will make you happy. Island style, oh yeah. We make your dream come alive. In Island style.
We have tiles and thin sets, mixes and grout. Everything you need is on the house out. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style Car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, quality rice, service. service choice. It's all an island style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, S Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. So call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And also, of course, the 1.1 is on time for a weather forecast as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talembert. The forecast for St. Lucia Valley for the next 24 hours, the winds will be blowing from the east near 21 miles per hour or 33 kilometers per hour with occasional gusts. The weather fair to partly cloudy skies with possibly isolated showers. And there is an advisory in every trade to small craft operators and sea beavers that advise to exercise caution due to brisk winds and locally rough seas. And the forecast for Los Angeles, fair skies becoming cloudy at times with a few brief showers. And the weather summary, the Atlantic high pressure system will continue to generate moderate to brisk easterly winds and locally rough seas across the Eastern Caribbean region over the next few days. Patches of low-level clouds drifting along the wind flow will produce a few showers over parts of the Los Angeles during the next 24 hours. And this was your weather forecast as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talembert.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Island style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island style, whoa. We got the time that will make you happy. Island style, oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island style.
We have tiles and thin sets, mixes and ground. Everything you need is on the house out. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. Quality rice, service choice. It's all an Island style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, S Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. So call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
And welcome back to our program here at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. And of course, we're looking at where we are at in the world right about now, and lots of questions being asked. And certainly, some people are already feeling the impact. Those who would have been depending on businesses getting products out of China and through a number of these online freight forwarding type companies are certainly finding themselves with a pretty hard situation to deal with already. Let's go to the phone lines at this time. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lunchroom.
Good afternoon, Mr. George.
How are you doing, caller?
Not too bad.
Wonderful.
We have a lot to talk about.
Indeed.
I'll start on steel. In around 1972, Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of England, take a chap from America they call McGregor, and McGregor's job was to close down all the steel work in United Kingdom. Close them down, because what she said, it's cheaper to buy the steel than to make it. The workers, and they was on subsidies. The workers was on subsidies, so she decided to close all the steel work. So I surprised now. I still hear in British Steel, because right now they want to national British Steel, whatever they do there, because steel was very cheap in Japan,
right,
in South Korea, and Germany as well. So they closed down this steel and they buying the steel. It's cheaper.
Yeah. But even Germany has gone the route of similar to. I mean, they still produce a lot more than the UK, yes, but I mean, in terms of
So
of today's
that's
production,
anyhow,
very small.
and then close down all the coal mine, and then start buying coal from Germany because they have open cast coal. Where in England you go on all the way under the sea to manufacture
To mine
coal.
it, yeah.
So it's a lot cheaper. Now, another thing I'll touch on as well is America. They are very greedy people. They are, although when things happen, they're there first. I can say that. But they are, if you sit down 10 minutes with American and they don't talk money, it's money talk. They don't talk money. How much you working for? How much you own? And everything in America is money because all the factory that was in America, America allowed it to go to China, to Vietnam, to Indonesia, and when they finish, because they make more money than just import the garment, import those things, and leave the workers dry. Yes, self-inflicted wound America was doing to themselves. And now they want to take advantage on the whole world. You see, I'll tell you, even the British was doing it as well. They let some big car factory to go to China, where else, and they closed all the docks in England. They say the workers working for too much money. They are unionized and they're asking for pay. So in England, they closed down most of the dock in England and they let this work go to China, to Vietnam, to those people. But what they used to do? The big store in United States, England, they would go to Indonesia. They will make a top,
right?
Little top you buy, like big store like CNN. They will buy the top for $13, but they pay in the people of Indonesia $3 for it. And those girls that work in Indonesia, they working for almost nothing, £5 a week with a little bowl of rice. They give them a cheap bowl of rice when dinner time. And that's what they're working for.
And I mean, that has been very well established, yes, the issues of
so the donkeys is in those countries.
Yeah, the labor exploitation has...
country. That's what the West was doing. That's what America was doing. That's what England was doing to people. And they never know those people will come up and work hard and start exporting to them. So now they cannot make the money they're making. What they do, they want to put tariff on them. Do this, do that. That is advantage. That is double standard in the world. And I always say, and I'll always say that, there's too much double standard. I have a lot more to tell you, but let somebody have a go.
Thanks very much for that, caller. Thanks for that point. It is very, very valid. That this has been the principle that much of the world has been advocating for a long time. I mean, the whole idea of development or industrialization by invitation, encouraging foreign direct investment. This has been part of the principle that the world has been operating for a very, very, very long time. And even right now, when we think about so many other sectors, these companies want to come in, they want to be able to sell you the latest technologies. They make very significant markups from these technologies. And that's what has been the game for a very long time. Good afternoon. Welcome to the lunchroom.
Yes, good afternoon.
How are you, caller?
I mean, it came to mind recently that, I mean, we came out of a pandemic and right now the economies of the world are on the rebound.
Right.
Only to have, one country's, policies just disrupt, the whole, global economy. I really think, that's unfortunate, and it will be sad if we go back into a recession so soon after another pandemic.
Very highly unfortunate. It says the least. And it's I mean, it's an unfortunate thing because this is all being created effectively by the desires of a few people who want to see this this significant resetting and an unfair advantage which they're trying to claim at this point. So yeah, I mean, as to how the world is going to cope, it's going to be a period of great uncertainty. And once you've got uncertainty, people are going to be pulling away their investments. They're going to be effectively, if you want, like hoarding their money, trying to see where they can place it. And there'll be way too many losers in this type of environment, unfortunately.
Yeah, because during the pandemic, people were saying in St. Lucia, nothing not running, to use our local,
right.
We don't want to go back to that state,
Yep, definitely not. A very, very unfortunate state of affairs indeed around the world. Thanks for that contribution, caller. And of course, the number to call in is 4523046. Again, 4523046. And you can also reach us at our WhatsApp number. That is 724-0008. And of course, especially for a small island developing state like St. Lucia, we don't have or enjoy any trade surpluses with any country in the world, and certainly not with the United States of America. In fact, we are highly dependent on our products as well as some services as well coming out of the US. And perhaps that's the only area where we kind of have some advantage in the area of services. And you do see in terms of tourism, perhaps we're a surplus. We might be. I'm not even too sure. We could assume that we are. We have a surplus with respect to tourism, and maybe to some degree business process outsourcing. Companies that have come out to establish call centers and the likes out here. But when you think about it, still though, a lot of the other things that we depend on, they're tied to other parts of the world and other companies, in multinational companies, in financial services, for example. That's an area where we had lots of Canadian participation, as well in the past. U.S. The U.S. Had, I think, Chase Manhattan Bank one long time ago, as well. The ownership of a lot of the hotels are also out of our control and our reach as well. And so this is what is helping the world to grow in great measure. We're seeing right now interest being played by many countries within the St. Lucia's economy. So, for example, right now, and this is good because this is one of the lessons we certainly do need to learn, that we cannot afford to put all our eggs in one basket. But when we look at the investment right now, you've got a Chinese company looking at building a hotel right now in terms of the CIP Galaxy. You've got a Turkish company investing in the island. Of course, they've got interests all around the world, but fundamentally that's where they're coming out of. We've seen Jamaican companies through Sandals getting involved in our tourism sector. And so you've got interest from in the past in the UK, as well as Canada and the US. And so that's good and that's healthy. And that shows that the world is certainly a place that is a lot more connected, a lot more open for investment. And that can certainly help us in the long run. But we certainly do depend on some of the very core services, which are American companies. A number of the airlines which we depend on to actually bring visitors to our shores are US-owned airlines, largely US-owned. The likes of American, the likes of Delta, JetBlue, right? These are primarily US-owned companies. The shipping, of course, that we also depend on, they are largely US-owned companies too. and they themselves are unfortunately finding clear risks in terms of their ability to do business. And not too long ago, I don't think we ever got a chance to actually share that piece, which was published from the Tropical Shipping, but I think would like to actually share that. It's from sometime last month, and they, in fact, were petitioning the U.S. Trade Representative on the matter of proposed fees to be imposed on Chinese-built ships. And just to very quickly share that, what they were saying back on March the 25th, Tropical Shipping President and CEO Tim Martin testified Monday before the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR, that the proposed tariffs would severely affect American-owned shipping companies as well as U.S. exporters and Caribbean businesses that ship with Tropical. The proposed tariffs include a flat $1 million port fee on Chinese-built ships or vessels entering U.S. ports. Quote, the U.S. shipping industry serving the Caribbean cannot absorb the additional costs of the proposed port fees, which would have significant economic consequences, Martin testified. Instead of strengthening American competitiveness, these port fees would push American-owned carriers like Tropical out of business, end quote. Tropical Shipping operates out of the port of Palm Beach, Florida, and 9 of its 19 vessels were built in China up to 25 years ago. Martin asked the USTR to exempt American-owned and headquartered vessel operators from proposed fees and to apply the tariffs on future ships built in China, but not on fleets that are already in service. Quote, I urge the committee to consider exemptions or policy adjustments that ensure American-owned shipping companies are not unfairly penalized for decisions made years before these tariffs, thereby ensuring a fair and equitable policy, Martin testified. Tropical transports about half of all goods imported to the Caribbean and Central and South America, poultry, agriculture products, groceries, building materials, medicine, and hurricane relief supplies. The proposed fees would force Tropical Shipping to double its freight rates, causing its Caribbean customers to buy from outside the U.S. at a higher cost. Additional impacts of the tariffs. And remember, just to pause here, they're talking about not even the new tariffs. These are tariffs that were being proposed regarding fees on Chinese-made vessels. These are not even the tariffs which we've now seen, the 104% tariffs on Chinese products. So we continue. Additional impacts of the tariffs. The proposed actions will create a multiplier effect across the American shipping industry and the Caribbean, including American businesses that export to the Caribbean and the U.S. supply chain, as well as our Caribbean counterparts and consumers buying the products we ship. The average vessel serving the Caribbean region is 1,100 TEUs. TEUs is a term that is used. It's a 20-foot equivalent unit. So, you have two different types of containers, cargo containers. There's a 20-foot and there's a 40-foot usually. And so they're just saying that that ship holds the equivalent of 1,100 20-foot containers. If the fees in the proposed actions are applied to these smaller vessels, we would have to double our freight rates with an average increase of $2,500 per 40-foot container. An increase of this magnitude would be catastrophic for American exporters and Caribbean consumers. As a comparison, applying the proposed $1 million fee to a vessel that calls on a single U.S. port directly from China carrying 16,000 TEUs would increase the cost per 40-foot container by only $125. Tropical expects the unintended consequences will be that America's third border, the Caribbean basin, will become China's new Red River, a trading route dominated by Chinese carriers and vessels transporting goods from China and other supply sources outside the United States. Tropical shipping's role in the Caribbean region. The Caribbean markets depends on our on-time, reliable shipping and our 60 years of experience in the market. And it goes on to speak to Tropical's operations in 30 ports and the fact that it has made donations. And of course, making the point that its vessels are much smaller than those large Pacific maritime carriers that are taking goods out of Chinese ports and Asian ports into the United States. And so that, of course, is the viewpoint of an American company that does business in the Caribbean and in Latin America, indicating that it is going to suffer. And in fact, the proposed tariffs in this instance, the tariff of placing a charge on once a vessel is made in China, doesn't matter that you're buying the vessel now. It doesn't matter that you bought the vessel 10, 15, 20 years ago. Once it was manufactured in China, they were planning on charging this additional $1 million per port entry. And so, of course, that would certainly mean that Caribbean countries would be placed in a situation where they would have to look elsewhere because they would certainly not be able to deal with the burden of the significant costs with respect to trade. Now, of course, this is something that, of course, the Caribbean perhaps still needs to look at because as of now, we are almost completely dominated by our dependence on U.S. routes and U.S. carriers. And so the need to, in fact, be able to diversify is perhaps something that's going to happen. Now, this is clearly not what the United States authorities would like to see. They actually obviously want to see more business, more trade for the U.S. But this is, in fact, a region that depends heavily on trade with the U.S. and depends heavily on these goods coming from the United States of America. And some of these policies are clearly not very well thought through because they are doing the exact opposite to what may be the effort at play. And so maybe to the extent that the aim is China and everything that you could throw at China at this point in time, you would like to do. But the other consequences are real, and that would be that countries are now going to see how they can trade, in fact, even more of the rest of the world, because it effectively means that the United States is making itself less competitive. It's making itself less attractive to be open to trade, and whether it might be trade in products, whether it might be trade in services. Those are the real threats at this point in time. And it is certainly even having an impact on the tourism sector for the United States' own tourism sector. This is a country, of course, that is looking towards hosting international games very, very soon. And people have to wonder, am I going to be okay with my visa getting in to the United States with all that you're actually hearing at this point? Let's take in one call before we end the program. Good afternoon. Welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you, caller?
I'm fine, thank you. There's just been a news break. I think Trump put a pause to 90 days pause on most of the countries. I think he brought it down to 10%. But China is 104.
Yes, China is 104. China is still 104.
Yeah.
There was a proposal. I'm not sure that you say that is actually official now. There was some.
They said
there was a rumor.
Although they're not trusting.
Yes, I'm
word.
seeing it now. Trump hits 90-day pause on most new tariffs, and the stock markets skyrocket, it says.
Yes.
Yes, well,
I think it's a game, he's playing there, with his billionaire
it
friends.
is, yeah, and it still is a very dangerous game, because then the
Yes,
big
it's a
question
game.
is, what could happen next? What could,
Because maybe by tomorrow he might say he's going back to, because
remember,
sometimes that's a
we've been
very
here.
dangerous
We've
game
been
he's
here with
playing.
respect, right? We've been here with respect to Mexico. Remember Mexico? We saw what happened with Canada,
Yeah.
right? And they're back and forth, and with respect to them and their own 90-day pauses and 30-day pauses, and so it's still pretty rocky, certainly.
Yeah, it is. But how can one man play that kind of game with the world because of the power he has?
And the other thing about it too is that even the treatment of China right now is still not going to be to the benefit of us,
No.
because people, whether we like it or not, they depend on Chinese products. They're depending on products coming out of China for their businesses, and a lot of these things have been through the United States, right?
But to me, Trump needs China more than China needs Trump and them.
Well,
America.
that's the big question at play right now, caller.
Yes.
Who needs the other more? Who can leverage more? Who can play at this game the longest without
I think China
without having to? And of course, China has certain advantages, without a doubt. I mean, they got very strong reserves. Of course, the United States has the ability to borrow, and it's very strong financial markets generally. So it's a very interesting state of play, but it's unfortunate that this is not something that's still impacting only China at this point in time. It's going to be the entire world is certainly still going to be.
And Trump is not a grounded leader. To me, Trump is not a grounded leader. He doesn't have the endurance. I mean, he's flip-flopping every day. Where those China and them, they're more. I think they're full of endurance to take on anything that comes their way. So the game he's trying to play there with them. So then it's going to mess America up more than it's going to mess up China and the other countries.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to see how, and maybe his new strategy is to, well, let's isolate China now, which he's tried before, by the way. He's tried this before, and of course, this is why.
It doesn't work.
Other countries were, investors went to certain countries instead of investing in China and that sort of thing. But again, we'll have to see how that all pans out.
Yes, because how can those other countries trust what he says?
Those are some big questions to ask, caller. And
of course,
and the fairness of it all too, right?
Yes.
Yep. Well, caller, thanks very much for that update, and of course, have a good one. And certainly. Yes, the caller is quite correct. Trump hitting a 90-day pause, which is a rumor that had been started yesterday, and it seems that it is now official. President Donald Trump announced a 90-day pause on all the reciprocal tariffs, quote unquote reciprocal tariffs, because that has been proven not to be reciprocal tariffs at all, that went into effect at midnight, with the exception of China, which will see tariffs increased to 125%. The U.S. Treasury Secretary said Trump's decision to back off tariffs rewarded nations, and this word, a very interesting word to be used, rewarded nations who chose not to retaliate. Mind you, there were a lot of countries who were, in fact, already planning to provide additional tariffs, including the EU. Anyways, to reward those countries who chose not to retaliate amid a brewing trade war and will allow time to negotiate new trade agreements. U.S. stocks were volatile and skyrocketed higher after Trump announced the pause. Earlier today, Beijing slammed retaliatory tariffs on the U.S., and the European Union also backed its first countermeasures. So, of course, we will continue to monitor the state of play on this matter of this global trade war, which we are witnessing unfolding day by day. We'll end it here for now. And of course, thanks for those who called in and who are following online as well. We do wish everybody a very safe and blessed day. I'm your host, Alex George Jr., saying goodbye.